is here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. Glad to be back live. I hope you enjoyed the best of yesterday. It was a big show. And happy Passover to my Jewish friends. Do I have to spend 3 hours talking about this guy dragged off the United Airline? I really don't intend to do that. It's getting plenty of play, plenty of attention. My own view is it was outrageous. It just is. They really didn't talk to the guy very much. They just kind of grabbed him and yanked him. He didn't do anything illegal. He didn't do anything wrong. He paid for his ticket. He was sitting on the plane. And, you know, by the time you get to the airport 2 hours ahead of time and go through the TSA check and get settled down and then you're near the plane and you're told to get off, it's not so easy. I don't know what the rules are. Just offer him more cash. Now look at the mess. But I don't want to talk about this. No calls on this. You can call everybody else. I know this is the sort of thing that gets the phones ringing, but I can't. I'll address it briefly on Levin TV, but I'm not going to spend 3 hours on radio on this. I want to remind you of something. It was, let's see, almost 36 years ago. August 2011. When something happened. Do you know what happened, Mr. Producer? 36 years ago in August, not 2011, in August 1980, whatever it is. You don't know? Does anybody know? Well, that's when Ronald Reagan fired the PATCO guys. And Joseph Martin, a professor in the New York Times several years ago, wrote about it. He said, when Reagan threatened to fire nearly 13,000 air traffic controllers unless they called off an illegal strike, he not only transformed his presidency, but also shaped the world of the modern workplace. Mark, what the hell does this have to do with anything? Stay with me. Look, I can talk about meatballs. I can talk about the guy being dragged off the airplane. I can talk about Caitlyn Jenner, whatever, having his whatever. But I'm not going to. More than any other labor dispute of the past many decades, Reagan's confrontation with the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization, or PATCO, undermined the bargaining power of American workers and their labor unions. This is not what I'm focused on. Just stay with me. It also polarized our politics in ways that prevent us from addressing the root of our economic troubles. This is in the New York Times, so understand the source. By firing those who refused to heed his warning and breaking their union, Reagan took a considerable risk. Even his closest advisors worried that a major air disaster might result from the wholesale replacement of striking controllers. Air travel was significantly curtailed, and it took several years and billions of dollars to return the system to its pre-strike levels. But the risk paid off for Reagan in the short run. He showed federal workers and, ready, Soviet leaders alike how tough he could be. Although there were 39 illegal work stoppages against the federal government between 1962 and 1981, no significant federal job actions followed Reagan's firing of the PATCO strikers. His forceful handling of the walkout, meanwhile, impressed the Soviets, strengthening his hand in the talks he later pursued with Mikhail S. Gorbachev. That's why I'm reading this to you, because I remembered it the same way. When President Trump launched the missile attack on the Syrian air base, he sent many signals. including to the Russians, obviously, the Red Chinese, all of our enemies and adversaries. That after 8 years of appeasement, after 8 years of capitulation, after 8 years of nonsense, where they took advantage of every step, that is, our adversaries and enemies, times were going to be a little different. A little different. And you can see we have a carrier fleet pretty much there, I think, off the coast of both Koreas in the South China Sea. And apparently we have a nuclear submarine, at least one, which is there. And the only thing that can take out a nuclear submarine, Mr. Producer, is another nuclear submarine. Nothing else can do it. I don't believe the North Koreans have a nuclear submarine. If the Chinese have one, they're not, they're just not up to par. Now, the inbred who runs North Korea, who inherited a country, isn't that cool? He can inherit an entire country. Not really. It's not cool at all. He today threatened to use nukes against us. Against us. Now, I understand that airline deal bothers people. I really do. But I really think we ought to be focused on this. You got a punk, I don't know if he's 30 or 32, whatever he is. Kim Jong Fat Boy. And he has his finger on a red button on a nuclear weapon. Now, the liberals used to say, can you imagine Donald Trump with a finger on a nuclear weapon? I think Hillary Clinton even said it, if not certainly intimated it. Well, can you imagine this nut job? Because that is what this president is concerned about. Obama didn't do a damn thing about it. Quite honestly, Bush didn't do a damn thing about it. Clinton did. He sent as much food and oil as he possibly could, that is his father, to help hold up that regime. I'm sorry, folks. My asthma is acting up a little bit. Hold on one second. I'm back. So anyway, I think this is crucially important. Now, let me ask you a question. China sent 150,000 troops, quote-unquote, on the Yalu River, which is on the border between China and North Korea. 150,000 troops. China also put out a statement today, its official communist news service did, saying, the United States really needs to think about what it's doing. And as a matter of fact, if we really thought that North Korea was crossing some line that we couldn't tolerate, we ourselves would take out the nuclear facilities. Well, that was interesting. But for me, I look at this differently than a lot of people. First of all, I'm not John McCain, and I wish he'd get the hell off of TV. He has way too much media attention for one senator from Arizona that nobody really pays attention to. And that goes for Rand Paul, too. The sort of radical, isolationist Rand Paul positions, which are some of the people who supported Trump during the presidential campaign. Oh, we're so disappointed. He needs to get off TV, too. I'm sick of these two. There's 100 senators, and these two are, it's way out of proportion. Same with the goofball Lindsey Graham. I believe Associate Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg thinks Lindsey Graham is a female, doesn't she, Mr. Producer? Matter of fact, I don't mean to cut away, but let's cut away. Can you play that for me? I believe it's our last cut. Go ahead.
The women of the Senate, Senators Dianne Feinstein and Lindsey Graham,
no comment. Anyway, so okay, I lost my. Okay, here I'm back. So anyway, here's the thing: you're president of the United States, and this sort of thing's going on. What are you going to do? You have a guy who runs a country with an iron fist, who has now said that he's prepared to use nukes against us. You just dismiss it? I mean, one nuke can take out an entire metropolitan area. And they're getting there. They're getting to the point of where they can use it. Nobody's threatening this nut job. He does it to control his population and to shake down other countries. Now, this was my point. People say, well, look what's happened now. Now Russia's threatening and China's threatening. Tell me, how is Russia threatening us right now as a result of what took place in Syria? How is Russia threatening us right now? What did Russia do exactly? You know, our military is still much bigger than Russia's military. Our economy is 4 or 5 times bigger than Russia's economy. Russia's economy is on its back right now. Did you know that? So Putin has modernized his nuclear weapons. He has gone pretty much as far as he can right now in modernizing his conventional weapons. So what's he going to do? He's going to invade somewhere that he wouldn't have invaded anyway? And their technology, while it's cutting edge, is not as reliable as our technology, quite frankly. We fired off 60 cruise missiles, and 59 hit their targets. That's pretty damn good. The Russians can't do that. The Russians sent a much older ship into the Mediterranean, where our 2 sparkling new, spanking new ships are. And so what now? Nothing. As a matter of fact, Putin said today that, tell you what a kook he's become. I'm sorry, all you Putin files out there, you code pink Republicans. Oh, Mark, you just want war. Oh, yeah, right, I want war. Why would I want war? We have enemies who want war. So Putin says, we're setting up an attack on the capital of Syria, I think he said, and we want to create the conditions the way we did in Iraq. And he wants to go to the UN and the Hague and these international organizations to investigate it. Does that sound like a guy who's about to go to war with us? Or does this sound like a guy who is concerned now that Barack Obama isn't president or Hillary Clinton isn't president? Oh, I think he's concerned. And I'll say for the 1,000th time, the liberals out there and the media out there should be ashamed of themselves. They tried to take Russia's obvious active attempt to influence our election a step further, which was outrageous, that Putin and Trump were working together so he would win the election, which was so outrageous, is still outrageous. It's the biggest lie in modern American politics. They have no evidence for that whatsoever. And this demonstrates what Trump is doing, that it's been a lie from day one. Now, China. We just sent a carrier fleet. That's big power off the coast of both Koreas, off the peninsula. Is China sending a fleet out to confront us? Well, maybe they will, but they haven't yet. Is China going to attack our fleet as they kept threatening to attack our ships in the South China? Well, they haven't yet, despite all their phony little islands. Well, what's that all about? Well, what's happening, ladies and gentlemen, is this. It was inevitable, quite frankly. Whoever the Republican president was, but it was inevitable, and it is inevitable under President Trump. Barack Obama allowed our enemies and adversaries so much leeway, they took such great advantage of us, that we had to change our policies. We had to begin to unravel what he did. We had to begin to reverse course. And that's exactly what's taking place right now. This administration isn't irresponsible. This administration isn't shooting from the hip. This administration is acting in ways that a responsible administration should. It's pushing back against Russia. Putin's been out of control. It's pushing back against China. China's been out of control. By using China, quite frankly, he's taken 2 different approaches. By using China to try and yank North Korea back. And they've made it utterly clear. If China is unable to yank North Korea back, then we will yank North Korea back. We cannot have Kim Jong fat boy threatening to blow up one of our cities with nuclear weapons. We just can't have it. And so to me, while this can be difficult, while it can be nerve-wracking, you can thank Barack Obama and the left for this. Because his policies couldn't continue forever. And somebody has had to come in and reverse course. Now, I know the Code Pink wing of the Republican Party, all 12 of them. I know they're furious about this. Because they're in many ways, they're very confused about this notion of America First. They think America First means you disengage essentially from foreign policy. If we're threatened, we pull back because we don't want to be globalists and interventionists. We centralize economic decision-making so as to protect this job and that job. I want to expand on this when I come back. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
The women of the Senate, Senators Dianne Feinstein and Lindsey Graham.
Wow. She must know something we don't know. Because we all know she's infallible. She's brilliant. Dianne Feinstein. And so what I'm trying to get to today is that in this regard, on this matter, on this issue, this president is actually conducting himself in a very competent and measured way so far with respect to Russia and China and Syria and North Korea. Now remember he came into office and remember what he found. I mean, Syria using chemical weapons. There was a deal back in 2013 with the UN. Russia was part of it. Russia was supposed to help get rid of those weapons. And North Korea? North Korea has violated the nuclear prohibitions year after year after year. No, I think what's being done right now is crucially important, and it's absolutely the right thing. We'll be right back. You know, ladies and gentlemen, there are times when men in positions or women in positions have to do the right thing. They have to stand up. I've told you the story about Dr. Joseph Warren. For those of you who weren't around for that or don't know what I'm talking about, Dr. Joseph Warren lived from 1741 to 1775. He was, during the lead up to the American Revolution, in Boston, he was, if not the leader, one of the leaders of the period before the official American Revolution, when in fact Boston and parts of New England were already in revolt. Joseph Warren was the son of a relatively wealthy man. He was one of the great doctors of the colonial period, and certainly in New England. He was a great orator, great writer, and he spent his time, much of his time when he wasn't caring for his patients, leading revolutionary activities against the British. He supported the tax revolt. He was so effective at organizing and using his resources to back the opposition to the crown that General Gage reportedly said that his death is worth the death of 500 colonists. And yet, because he died as such a young man, he was around 34, 35 years old at the time, and I'll get into this in a minute, and I'll explain why in a minute. Many people have never heard of him before. They've heard of his compatriots, John Hancock, and Samuel Adams and Paul Revere, but they may not have heard of Dr. Joseph Warren, one of the truly great American revolutionary heroes. He never lived to see the issuance of the Declaration of Independence. He never lived to see any of it. But because of him and men like him, we are a free people. As a very young man, he became the president of the Provincial Congress. He was the one who sent Paul Revere, among others, to warn Sam Adams and John Hancock that the British were coming. And he fought at the Battle of Lexington. And General Gage and the British, they wanted him dead, and they wanted him dead very badly. Just a citizen, American physician, became president of the Revolutionary Massachusetts Provincial Congress. 13 days before the Battle of Bunker Hill. 13 days before the Battle of Bunker Hill. Joseph Warren and Artemus Ward, General of the Massachusetts Army, and Moses Gill, Chairman of the Committee of Supplies, three tremendous heroes, sent a letter to the New York Congress begging them for supplies, begging them for ammunition, particularly gunpowder. Here's what they wrote 13 days before the Battle of Bunker Hill. Your noble exertions in the common cause, your zeal for the maintenance of the rights of America and the sympathizing concern with which we know you look on our suffering, encourages us to represent to you the distressed state of this colony. Our capital, Boston, is filled with disciplined troops, thoroughly equipped with everything necessary to render them formidable. A train of artillery as complete as can be conceived of, a full supply of arms and ammunition, and an absolute command of the harbor of Boston, which puts it in their power to furnish themselves with whatever they shall think convenient by sea, are such advantages as must render our contest with them in every view extremely difficult. We suffer at present the greatest inconveniences from a want of a sufficient quantity of powder, meaning gunpowder. Without this, every attempt to defend ourselves or annoy our enemies must prove abortive. We've taken every step to avail ourselves of this article by drawing into our general magazine whatever could be spared from the respective towns of this colony. But the frequent skirmishes we have had has greatly diminished our stock, and we're now under the most alarming apprehensions that notwithstanding the bravery of our troops, whom we think we can without boasting declare are ready to encounter every danger for the preservation of the rights and liberties of America, we shall barely, for the want of the means of defense, fall at last a prey to our enemies. We therefore most earnestly beseech you that you would, if possible, afford in some relief in this respect, by lending or selling to us some part of the gunpowder in your colony. We readily conceive the unwillingness with which you must part with so necessary an article at this time. We know you have not the quantity you would wish to keep for your own use. We apply to you, not because we suppose you have a surplusage, but because we are in the most distressing want. We beg, therefore, that we may be not suffered to perish. We have taken such steps as we have great reason to hope will in a short time furnish us sufficiently with powder. And if we can be assisted until that arrives, we doubt not but that we shall be able to baffle the designs of our enemies and be greatly instrumental in preserving the rights and liberties of all America. We must request that whatever aid you shall find, in it your power to give us may be in the most secret manner, as a knowledge of our deficiency in the article of powder, before we are supplied, might be attended with the most fatal consequences. And these three patriots, led by Warren, signed boldly at the conclusion of the letter. And there's a postscript in the letter. And the postscript says, "We beg what powder you can possibly spare may be immediately conveyed to us by land in the way least liable to be suspected by any persons who may correspond with the enemy." Nobody really knows if New York was able to provide Massachusetts with desperately needed gunpowder, but it's very unlikely, because the New Yorkers were heavily involved in raiding of armories and the seizures of local governments by the British, too. 13 days later, the Battle of Bunker Hill. And there's a redoubt at Bunker Hill called Breed's Hill. And it was the most vulnerable spot. And they dug in, the colonists, the Americans, knowing full well the British would charge. They would charge up the hill. And from Bunker Hill, our men could see over Boston Harbor. They could also see, obviously, down the hills. And the British were quite formidable. The British took their first run at Breed's Hill. And they were pushed back. They charged it again. And they were pushed back again. And they charged it a third time. And the colonists ran out of gunpowder. Breed's Hill was overtaken. Dr. Joseph Warren had been appointed a general in the militia. But he knew he didn't have the experience to lead a military operation. So he went on the front lines, the very front line, and he fought with his troops. He fought with the troops. The men and the women, the men who came out of their homes, out of the towns to fight. And as the British stormed that redoubt, Breed's Hill, Joseph Warren reportedly told his troops, quote, "These fellows say we won't fight. By heaven, I hope I shall die up to my knees in blood." Well, Joseph Warren would die that day. He took a round right between his eyes. He had no more gunpowder. And what the British did to his body was truly grotesque. They decapitated him. They spit on him. They stabbed him repeatedly with bayonets. They cut his body up into small pieces. And eventually he was put in a shallow grave. Later, Paul Revere, as you know, who was a blacksmith, Paul Revere, who had made Warren's false teeth, identified him. Joseph Warren, the great American hero. That document I read from, 13 days before his death, I'm proud to say I just acquired, because as you know, I try to acquire certain documents, assuming I can afford them, and put them where I believe they belong. The Federalist Papers, one of the rare and finest copies of the volume that Hamilton had printed, is with Hillsdale College in Washington, D.C. The last lease to Mount Vernon, handwritten almost completely by George Washington when he was a colonel, has been put where it belongs, at Mount Vernon. Joseph Warren gives me a lot of inspiration. His life, short life, how he led it, his beliefs, his sacrifice. That's why I decided to acquire this letter. Now, what's this have to do with anything? It has everything to do with everything. When I hear these debates from people on the left and the so-called right who put down this country because we hit a base in Syria, when I hear because we send a flotilla to protect our allies and protect ourselves into the South China Sea, when I hear the president, when he's doing something right and bold and courageous, being attacked by the radical left, by the code pink left and the code pink Republicans, I find it appalling. Not the fact that you can have this debate, but the arguments. Donald Trump has decided, remember, I was a Cruz backer in the primaries, and Trump is not, to me, a constitutional conservative. That has nothing to do with any of this. Now we're talking about his actions. President Trump has taken steps to protect this country. To protect this country. What he did in Syria, what Reagan did with Patco, but what he did in Syria was not only to address a horrific injustice, where the UN and the United States and all these other countries had already said that Syria can't do this and Russia already agreed. It's to tell Russia, get the hell out of our face, Mr. Putin. Get back in your box. We won't bother you. Now stop bothering us and our friends. It's to tell Iran, we know who you are, we know what you are, and we know what you're up to. And you're going to have to think about things a little differently than you did with Obama. It's to tell North Korea and China the same exact thing. I know it seems hard given all the static, the media static and so forth. But these things are intended, and I believe rightly so, to protect us. To protect us. And that's how you make America great again.
Mark Levin.
By the way, I want to talk about during the course of this program also, where are the Republicans in Congress? Obamacare, tax cuts, Southern Wall apparently isn't going to be in this budget. I want to talk about the establishment media, including the Wall Street Journal. We're going to get into a lot of things today, so stick with us. But I am not talking about meatballs. And I really don't think we need to go over and over and over again about that doctor who was dragged through that airplane. I agree with most people that was outrageous. Truly was. Now they're coming out with stuff in his background which is pretty seedy, but it has nothing to do with what took place, so why should I give that voice right now? You know, like the proverbial frog that does not notice the rise in water temperature until it's too late, investors seem to be experiencing a similarly stealthy rise in inflation. Consider the following. Housing costs are now rising at the fastest pace in nearly a decade. Medical inflation is not as contained as many had thought. Wages are rising. Consumer inflation expectations are also starting to tick higher. Should inflation expectations rise faster than normal rates, gold is likely to continue to merit a place in most portfolios. Now, you can't afford to wait. Gold is in my portfolio. Matter of fact, it's in my hands. I love gold. I really do. Gold coins in particular. Now, if it's not in yours, please call my friends at Goldline, the only gold company I trust in these uncertain times. You owe it to yourself. 1-877-365-COIN. 1-877-365-2646. My gold company, Goldline, lets you start for as little as $100 a month. Call Goldline, and if you call now, listen to this. Gold Line will also give you a free Ronald Reagan presidential coin just for calling. Call right now, 1-877-365-COIN. Be sure to read their important risk information to be sure that buying gold is right for you. Now, remember, when those Ronald Reagan coins run out, they run out. So give them a buzz, 1-877-365-COIN, 1-877-365-2646. All right. Do we have time to take a call, Mr. Producer? No, we don't. 45 seconds is not enough time. We're going to continue on this. We're also going to talk about what I said, Obamacare. Where's the Republican Congress now? You know, I'm starting to think we're running out of people who can be Speaker of the House. I really am. To take a lousy bill and try and ram it through. Now we have no tax cut plan that's being set forth. And by the way, the administration hasn't put out a new plan. It's one thing to say something during a campaign. You got to say something now. The Republicans, particularly in the Senate, really don't want to fund the wall on the southern border like I told you they wouldn't because of Schumer. So here we are.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. This is Hour 2. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. August 3, 1981. Ronald Reagan speaking about the PATCO strike. Go.
This morning at 7 a.m., the union representing those who man America's air traffic control facilities called a strike. This was the culmination of 7 months of negotiations between the Federal Aviation Administration and the union. At one point in these negotiations, agreement was reached and signed by both sides, granting a $40 million increase in salaries and benefits. This is twice what other government employees can expect. It was granted in recognition of the difficulties inherent in the work these people perform. Now, however, the union demands are 17 times what had been agreed to, $681 million. This would impose a tax burden on their fellow citizens which is unacceptable. I would like to thank the supervisors and controllers who are on the job today helping to get the nation's air system operating safely. In the New York area, for example, 4 supervisors were scheduled to report for work and 17 additionally volunteered. At National Airport, a traffic controller told a news person he had resigned from the union and reported to work because, quote, how can I ask my kids to obey the law if I don't, end quote. This is a great tribute to America. Let me make one thing plain. I respect the right of workers in the private sector to strike. Indeed, as president of my own union, I led the first strike ever called by that union. I guess I'm maybe the first one to ever hold this office who is a lifetime member of an AFL-CIO union. But we cannot compare labor management relations in the private sector with government. Government cannot close down the assembly line. It has to provide without interruption the protective services which are government's reason for being. It was in recognition of this that the Congress passed a law forbidding strikes by government employees against the public safety. Let me read the solemn oath taken by each of these employees, the sworn affidavit when they accepted their jobs. I am not participating in any strike against the government of the United States or any agency thereof, and I will not so participate while an employee of the government of the United States or any agency thereof. It is for this reason that I must tell those who fail to report for duty this morning they are in violation of the law, and if they do not report for work within 48 hours, they have forfeited their jobs and will be terminated.
Now, my recollection is that about 25% of them came back to work and the others did not, and they were fired. And they were banned from holding jobs again in the federal government. They were fired. And what happened was, unbeknownst to Patco, the air traffic controllers for the military, to the extent they could be, were moved into civilian use, manning the towers at major airports around the country. Now, among those who saw this, as I mentioned in the first hour, was Mikhail Gorbachev. The Soviets saw it. And the Soviets saw, oh, wow, this guy's a lot different than Jimmy Carter. And over the weekend, as I was thinking about Trump ordering the attack on that air base in Syria, obviously it's not a direct parallel, but the point is, he showed Putin, he showed Xi, he showed the Islamo-Nazi in Tehran, he showed them all that things have now changed, not just by rhetoric, but by action. Now, I want you to think about something. Those 59 missiles were shot into Syria, I guess, early Friday morning. Some parts of our country would have been late Thursday night. Okay, today's Tuesday. The world has not crumbled around America. The Russians have not fired a single shot. Putin seems confounded. Putin's not sure what to do. Sends an older ship into the Mediterranean Sea. Well, that's not going to bother anybody. Today he talks about The Hague and the UN. Okay, great. We went to the UN, and it was Putin at the Security Council who kept blocking action against Syria in violation of the September 2013 UN resolution. And all this occurred while the president was in Mar-a-Lago having dinner with Xi, the communist dictator in China. Cool as a cucumber. The inbred who inherited his country from his father, the Stalinist inbred, Kim Jong Fat Boy, today he threatened to use nuclear weapons against America. Now, for years, as the Red Chinese were building fake islands in the South China Sea, threatening the Philippines, threatening Vietnam, threatening South Korea, now in the East China Sea, threatening Japan, Obama, every now and then, would send a frigate or something through there and maybe a bomber through the airspace, and the Chinese would make threats. But nothing effective was done. And all during this time I said, well, we ought to have a flotilla there, an aircraft carrier with its accompanying ships permanently in that area, permanently, which means we have to build up our military and get back to a Navy with close to 600 ships. Now we're under 300 ships. And they can build all the islands they want, and we will have our own aircraft carrier with its jets and accompanying protective ships and so forth, and we'll make sure the navigable waters are navigable. And we'll make sure international waters remain international, and that the international airspace remains international. And at the same time, we should encourage Japan and South Korea to build up their militaries. Well, the president has sent a small armada, if you will, a aircraft carrier with the accompanying ships, exactly where they ought to be. And now that he hit Syria, North Korea has to take that seriously. So does China. China has sent 150,000 troops, reportedly, on the border with North Korea. But China, again, I just want to reiterate, issued a very interesting statement today. Their official communist, news platform. And that is that, the United States needs to be very careful about what it thinks about doing, which is a platitude, but it said further that if China believed North Korea took steps that were, in China's view, too far when it comes to nuclear weapons, China itself would take out those nuclear sites. Now, I don't believe that. But that's very different rhetoric than you would hear if Barack Obama were still president or if Hillary Clinton was president. Very, very different rhetoric. And again, the problem is, people throw these phrases around, and most of the people who throw them around have no idea what they're talking about. People who do it on radio and TV are just trying to generate ratings. People who do it websites just trying to generate hits. This has nothing to do with neoconservatism. It's nothing to do with neoconservatism. It's nothing to do with John McCain or Lindsey Graham. Nothing whatsoever. This is reality. This is reality. This is to make sure not only America is first, but Americans are protected. To hear people sound like Code Pink while they're saying, make America great again, and America should be number one, while trashing their own country, it's really frustrating to me. Once again, globalism is not an economic matter. Globalism is a sovereignty matter. As I've said time and again, globalism means that you are surrendering or conferring your governing authority onto international organizations or foreign organizations, thereby denying you and me the franchise, denying you and me the ability to control our own futures. That's globalism, which we all reject, except for the left, except for the progressives. But all of us on this side, such as it is, reject that. It's nothing to do with commerce and trade, and it has nothing to do with what Trump is doing. Well, look at this, he's a globalist. No, he's not a globalist in that sense. He's not surrendering our sovereignty. He's defending our sovereignty. It is amazing that I find myself in the position defending Donald Trump more than Pat Buchanan. I find myself in the position of defending Donald Trump more than a lot of these so-called nationalist populists who are really, really confused about what all that means. I'm not free to disclose this because it would be violating a confidence. I was called by a very, very senior person. No, not Steve Bannon. I don't remember the last time Bannon called me, quite frankly. But I don't know where they got my number from, but they called, no, not the president, but a very, very senior person. And the person was lamenting, this, that, and the other. And I said, let me explain something. I'm not an establishment Republican, and I'm not a nationalist populist. I'm a constitutional conservative. I was a constitutional conservative when I was 13 years old, and I'm a constitutionalist conservative now, almost 60 years old. My principles aren't, they're not flexible, they're not negotiable. And the ends are the same: to roll back this government which is out of control, and to advance individual liberty, and to restore our constitutional republic. And I don't care who the president is, that has to be the goal. And when this president does what I consider to be the right thing, he will have my unvarnished support. And when he does the wrong thing, he will have my unvarnished opposition. But it is not my objective to sabotage the man, just to voice my opinion. And in this, I happen to agree with him. I don't agree with John McCain. We need to do more. We need to... Sit down, John, and shut up for once in your life, would you? Or Lindsey Graham. Can we play that Ruth Bader Ginsburg cut one more time, Mr. Producer?
The women of the Senate, Senators Dianne Feinstein and Lindsey Graham.
We better stop playing. I can't stop laughing when I hear it. The women of the Senate, she's barely with us. The women of the Senate, now, here's my question to you on this. Then we'll take a short break. Am I laughing at her comment about Dianne Feinstein or Lindsey Graham?
Mark Levin.
You know, those of you who've been with me a long time or a long enough time, you know I don't like bullies. And there are a lot of bullies in the media. I feel mostly they're kind of nerdy types who were pushed around when they were little kids, and then they get to become journalists or editorial writers, and then they think they have a ton of power, you know. And I'm going to have a guest on at the bottom of the hour, Sebastian Gorka. He's Deputy Assistant to the President. I don't know all the titles, but he's fairly senior over there at the White House. And over the years, I've read the things that this man has written. They're absolutely outstanding. When it comes to foreign policy, I view him as, quite frankly, a traditional conservative. And we're going to want to tap into his considerable knowledge about what's going on. You've probably heard him on other shows throughout the weeks, but he hasn't been on my show. And he's under vicious attack. Vicious attack. People trying to smear him, trying to force him out of the White House, trying to create controversy around him in hopes that he'll leave or be forced out because he is a solid conservative. They're even trying to suggest that he has connections to the Nazis. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I've looked at this. This is a horrendous smear on this man. Horrendous. Now, I am a constitutional conservative. I am a veteran of the Reagan administration, and I am Jewish. And he's not anything like they portray him on the left. Period. They try and take our best and brightest and turn them into monsters. That's what the left does. It's a Soviet tactic. It's an Alinsky tactic. You know, we've talked about this for a decade and a half. And these are the tactics they use. They'll go after Nunes on some ground. They'll go after Sessions on some ground. Obviously, they'll go after Trump on some ground. They'll go after Gorka on some ground, or this one or that one, and so forth, where these men and women don't even recognize themselves by the time the left is done with them. I get a taste of this every couple of years when they make a run at me. And, you know, I must hate women. I must hate minorities. I must hate myself. I must hate this. I must hate that. They cherry pick what you say. They twist it. And they try and create an impression. And it's really dastardly. It's unconscionable. But this is what they do on the left. So you grow a thick skin. I have a very thick skin. But I fight back. You'll remember after I went through the articles and raised questions about police state tactics and the politicization of intelligence by the Obama administration, you remember for 3 or 4 weeks how I fought back. Right-wing conspiracy, a hack, and a this and a that and so forth. These are people who don't know me, who've never read a thing that I've ever written, and really don't listen to the program. You'll remember before that, PBS ran a 2-night special, Frontline did, called Divided States of America. The producer of that program, the man behind the whole thing, all he did is do some of the clips where I have a particularly idiotic caller and tell them to get lost and so forth. But they never played any of the information about our discussions about history and economics and the Constitution and philosophy. None of it, not a word. And so we tried to get the man on the phone. He wouldn't come on. So these smear tactics, these efforts to character assassinate, are widespread. I just want you to keep that in mind. In any event, I invited Sebastian Gorka on, I think, the first time in a very, very long time, if ever, to give us his take, officially, on what's going on in the world from the perspective of the White House. We'll be right back.
in an insane world. The Mark Levin Show. Call him now at 877-381-3811.
If you want the absolute best shirts around, you have to check out CT Shirts. I want you to try them, because once you do, you'll never go back to some random shirt off the shelf of a department store. Plus, CD shirts come in custom sizes, so you're not messing with ill-fitted sleeve lengths or neck sizes. It's time to step up your game and look your best. So I got you a special CT Shirts deal. CT Shirts are British-styled using the softest, most exquisite fabrics ever. Work or casual, tie or no tie, tucked or untucked. When you're wearing a CT shirt, you look great, and you know it. So here's the deal. One CT shirt normally costs $100, but right now you'll get 3 shirts for just $99. That's 60% off. And CT Shirts come with free delivery, a 6-month quality guarantee, and free returns. So if you hurry, $99 gets you 3 amazing CT Shirts. Go to ctshirts.com/Levin. That's ctshirts.com/Levin. ctshirts.com/Levin. Well, it's a pleasure to have Deputy Assistant to the President, Sebastian Gorka. How are you, sir?
Greetings, Mr. Levin.
Well, it's a great pleasure. You may be the only Trump official I've had on the show. I'm serious about that.
Well, it's an honor, and I have to say, before we talk about Syria, as somebody who spent his formative years in Margaret Thatcher's UK and watched your former boss, Ronald Reagan, with great admiration, I have to say thank you for keeping the flame of classical conservatism alive.
Well, thank you. Much, much appreciated. Now, Sebastian Gorka, I've been a follower of yours for a long, long time. And I actually support strongly what the president is doing, what he's done in Syria, what he's doing off the coast of Korea, the Koreas, and so forth. Explain a little bit what's going on here.
Very simply put, the man that was Donald Trump before January the 20th is the same man who is the president today. He has reinstigated American leadership around the world. We're not going to perpetuate the vacuum created by President Obama that was exploited by people like Assad, like Putin, like the crazy regime in North Korea, and we are reasserting the values that made America great and will make America great again. So it's leadership from the front, and it's standing up to the founding principles of the Republic. It's that simple, Mark.
And really, he can't do anything else unless he's going to adopt the Obama policy, which is turn and run.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to, for all the people who supported Donald Trump on November the 8th, I'd like them to think about one thing. What we did on Thursday is not 2003, nor is it the first Gulf War in 1991. The president is clear. He's not about invading other people's countries and occupying them, but he is not going to let dictators use weapons of mass destruction against unarmed women and children. And if you have a problem with us launching a cruise missile strike on a airport, on an airfield used to execute such an attack, you need to look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, what is the problem with taking that action and making a red line a real red line?
What do you say to people who say, wow, I mean, he's embraced the McCain wing of the Republican Party?
I say they really need to look at the facts. The idea that deploying 150,000 troops into the Middle East is the same as one of our ships sitting in safety in the Med, launching unmanned vehicles to take out this airfield. The two cannot be compared. And also, there's a very important point here. Statecraft leadership is nothing if it doesn't understand that diplomacy must be backed up by force. We've had 8 years of just words that were exploited by our enemies, and on top of that, the support of our enemies when you look at the JCPOA Iran deal, the ransoms, and everything else. We understand, and the president understands this implicitly. Diplomacy is nothing if you're not prepared to back it up with force. And everybody who needs to understand what we did in Syria on Thursday understands it. Look at the nations that have an issue with it, and you will see just how morally sound our actions were, and also how they overlapped with our national security as well.
And really, Russia hasn't done anything in response, has it?
No, just some very predictable statements that they had to make for domestic internal purposes, but I think they are drawing the necessary conclusions that there is a point at which your satrapy, your client state, maintaining a state like Assad's state is no longer in the interest of even the Kremlin, and I think they're starting to understand that as well.
And people need to understand that and of course I have a Russian background, and that the Russians aren't 10 feet tall. I mean, their economy is relatively small compared to ours, and their economy is hurting, isn't it?
This is one of the first things Ronald Reagan understood in one of his first meetings in the NSC. When he found out, he asked, what is the GDP of the Soviet Union? And he was told roughly on par with California. Then he understood how much of a paper tiger the Soviet Union was. So yes, if you look at the GDP, if you look at their resource-intensive economy, if you look at their demographics, 600,000 people a year die in Russia more than are born. That's a demographic reality. So yes, we look at the world as it is, not as we would wish it to be, which was the last White House.
Now, what's going on with North Korea right now?
Well, there I'm going to be very cautious because unlike the Clinton administration, unlike the Obama administration, we do not give our game plan away. We do not tell people that are our adversaries what to expect from us, as Clinton did in the Balkans, as the last president did in Iraq. But I think people understand that the movement of our vessels, the action we took on Thursday, they're all part of the same kind of deck of cards. We are reinforcing the statements made by the President, by Secretary Tillerson, with actions that fill the vacuum created by the Obama administration.
But this kid who inherited this country, he's a very dangerous young man, isn't he?
Well, the problem with that nation in particular is that unlike other countries, including, I would say, even the Russian Federation, you simply cannot model them on the rational actor models that we use. That when ideology overtakes reasoned cost-benefit analysis, nations like North Korea are very difficult to model. That's why other messages are needed. So yes, it's a little bit like, that's the similarity, Mark, between Iran and North Korea. We are not looking at your standard rational actors in either case.
The way I see this, or the way I express it, I'm no expert like you are, I said that, look, Donald Trump has to address some of the things that were either not addressed or addressed poorly by the prior administration. He can't duck it. So he can't duck Syria completely in the chemicals and weapons of mass destruction. He can't duck what's going on in North Korea and some of these other places. He can't duck what's going on in Iran. Otherwise, he'll be, continuing the Obama policies.
Right. And look, it's very important that everybody, whether you voted for him or not, is clear on this issue. There is no desire and no intent inside the White House, inside the Oval Office. The President does not wish to be some kind of global policeman. That is not what we're talking about. But as you rightly pointed out, we have inherited a global firestorm. If you look any cardinal point on the compass, north, south, east, or west, the world is on fire. Just one thing. I mean, if you listen to the United Nations, we have 65 million refugees in the world today. That's more than we had in 1945 after the death camps and the destruction of World War II. That is in part a direct function of the feckless foreign policy and the lack of leadership under the Obama administration. We can't ignore that because sooner or later that will have a national security impact on every American living in the United States as well.
I'm a little concerned about the military budget. I actually think it should be bigger than it is, but that's not your problem. I'm just mentioning it. And I'm a little concerned that it doesn't seem to be a priority. We have got to muscle up our military. It's been so degraded over the last 8 years. Do you get any sense on Capitol Hill that there's some urgency to get this done?
I do from certain individuals. It's not a groundswell yet, but if you look at, there's a lot of freshman congressmen, many of them who are actually Iraq veterans. Some of them are my friends. They fully understand it. When you look at the U.S. Marine Corps. In the last 8 years, ended up having to cannibalize active aircraft they were using so that they could use those spare parts for other aircraft. That is the dire situation that we inherited, and the president is serious about fixing that as well. But it's separation of powers, so as you rightly note, we have to have that requisite support on the Hill to make things happen, because the purse strings are there. The intent exists in the White House. We've already said, with the increase in budget, the direction we need to go in, but it's not just up to the president.
I don't want to encourage you to get into this in any great detail. What is it like to be under constant attack in ways that really are quite vicious? You know them to be vicious. You know them to be wrong. Are you still glad you're over there in the White House and so forth, despite it all?
Oh, look, Mark, I'm living the dream. I was an immigrant. I chose this country because I truly believe it's the last great hope. I came here 9 years ago, and I'm walking around the West Wing every day. So, God has smiled on me, and I'm thankful for that. And when all of this fake news attacks, there's going to be another one in USA Today tomorrow, I just smile and I laugh. Why? Because I'm not in the cellar of the secret police headquarters in Budapest being tortured like my father in 1950. So bring it on. Colin Kahl, Ben Rhodes, Politico, I laugh in your face because it is pathetic and it's only words.
Mm-hmm. All right, Sebastian. Sebastian Gorka, Deputy Assistant to the President. We appreciate you coming on, brother.
It's been an honor anytime, and thank you for everything you do for this nation.
Well, thank you, and God bless you. He's a good man. Of course, they're trying to destroy him, but they will fail. And they will fail. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
A breach of an online tool used by federal student loan applications may have compromised up to 100,000 taxpayers. The IRS data tool allows tax returns to be uploaded to the free application for student aid. Identity thieves use stolen data to file fake tax returns, and the IRS estimates that 8,000 fraudulent refunds were issued, totaling $30 million. So it's that time of year, folks. The tool was taken offline in March after the breach was discovered, and the IRS has started notifying people who may have been affected. Now's the time to protect yourself. Identity theft happens when thieves use your information to pretend that they're you, especially around your taxes and tax time. They can liquidate your bank accounts or even get retirement funds. LifeLock scans hundreds of millions of transactions each second. If they detect your information, they send you an alert immediately. If you have a problem, a U.S.-based agent will work to fix it. Free credit monitoring only alerts you to changes in credit. No one can prevent all identity theft or monitor all transactions at all businesses. But go to LifeLock.com or call 1-800-LifeLock. Use promo code Levin, that's Levin, for 10% off your LifeLock Ultimate Plus membership. 1-800-LifeLock, 1-800-LifeLock, code Levin, Levin. All right. We're going to go to a gentleman. Let me see here, Mr. Producer. Hold on, folks. We're going to Chris, a trucker in Florida. Chris, your middle name is Warren, WJTK. Go.
Good afternoon, Mr. Levin. It's a great honor to speak to you.
Thank you.
I almost fell off. If I had been sitting on the Jack Forks River down in southern Missouri, I would have fallen in the river knowing that I would get to speak to you. So it's a great honor.
Well, thank you.
My great-great-great-grandfather was Major General Joseph Warren, Dr. Warren.
Wow.
And, I thought it was interesting to hear you speak of his name, and so I'm very grateful.
Well, I'm a huge fan of his. I've tried to draw as much national attention to him as I can. I've talked about him in significant time on the radio 2 or 3 times. I have acquired, I'm getting this document I told you about, where he and his 2 Patriot colleagues are begging New York to send them some gunpowder because Massachusetts is running out of gunpowder.
Yes, sir.
And you know the story. 13 days later, there he is on Breed's Hill on the front line where he didn't have to be, and the third time up, he gets killed.
That's right. He pretty much had his head blown off. It was passed down through the family. The documents that were sent to General George Washington about his death. And my mom is in possession of those, and we have other documents that my brother has and some of the other family members have.
Well, he just doesn't get the attention that he deserves because he died so young. I guess he was 34 or 35, right?
Yes, sir. And just prior to his death, I think it was like 3 or 4 days before he went up to Bunker Hill, most of his documents and stuff, because the British were really after him. I mean, they despised him and they were after him. And most of his documents, including his 2 children, his wife had died during childbirth, and his brother raised the 2 sons, and they actually collected most all of his documents and everything before he was, just after him being commissioned as a major general by Washington in the Continental Congress, because he was in fear of the documents and stuff being captured.
So you're saying his brother collected up the documents?
Collected up a lot of the documents and raised the 2 children, a son and a daughter. And my family is from the son's side of the family. And that patriotism went all the way down through the from the Revolutionary War down to Tennessee, where my great-grandfather was the youngest captain in the Union Army, and he was run out by the Southerners, where they ended up in Richland, Missouri. And they're still very prominent, the Warren family. Now, we're no kin to Elizabeth Warren, thank God.
No, right. She says she's Native American anyway, you know.
That's right.
She's 1/1 billionth, I think. So, well, that's fascinating. It's very interesting. So does the family ever get together to talk about Dr. Warren?
On occasion, since my father passed away, and his sister and another sister, a lot of that stuff isn't talked amongst. Now, we still have family still up in Massachusetts, but we have a lot of the Revere ware. He was a silversmith, and Paul Revere gave my great-great-great-grandfather a lot of silver and stuff like that, and my interest began actually through the Masonic Lodge, because Joseph Warren, a lot of the Patriots were all Masons, and they were able to secretly move around because of that. So there's a lot of documents about him up in D.C., too, at the Masonic Lodge.
Of course, Washington was a Mason, too. But, no, this is remarkable. We'll keep those documents in very safe places, right?
Yes, sir.
They're very, very important. Well, listen, it was a pleasure. I'll tell you what, don't hang up. I want to give you a subscription to CRTV, so don't hang up. You never know who's listening. That's absolutely fascinating. And we checked out the gentleman, and he's true blue. We'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. I'm having fun tonight. Are you having fun? We're moving in and out of history. We're moving in and out of foreign policy. We're moving in and out of domestic affairs. Haven't talked about meatballs yet. haven't given a lot of time to the doctor who was dragged through the aisle in the United jet. I'll leave that to everybody else. They'll spend 3 hours a day on it. That's okay by me. Can I read you something else? And there's a reason for this. There's a reason why I do all this. This is, and I'm going to get in trouble for this, but so be it. This is from page 10. I think it's page 10 of my new book that's not out till July 4th. It's not even out for almost 3 months. But I'm cherry picking just because I want to have some fun with you. On May 8th, 1825, May 8th, 1825, 49 years after the adoption of the Declaration of Independence, in a letter replying to Henry Lee about the source of the ideas and language in the Declaration, Thomas Jefferson succinctly explained, and I quote, now remember, he was the main drafter of the Declaration. He said, with respect to our rights and the acts of the British government contravening those rights, there was but one opinion on this side of the water. All American Whigs thought alike on this subject. When forced, therefore, to resort to arms for redress, an appeal to the tribunal of the world was deemed proper for our justification. This was the object of the Declaration of Independence. Not to find out new principles or new arguments, never before thought of, not merely to say things which had never been said before, but to place before mankind the common sense of the subject, in terms so plain and firm as to command their assent and to justify ourselves in the independent stand we are compelled to take. Neither aiming at originality of principle or sentiment, nor yet copied from any particular and previous writing. It was intended to be an expression of the American mind, and to give that expression the proper tone and spirit called for by the occasion. All its authority rests, then, on the harmonizing sentiments of the day, whether expressed in conversation, in letters, printed essays, or in the elementary books of public right, as Aristotle, Cicero, Locke, Sidney, etc. The historical documents which you mention as in your possession ought all to be found, and I am persuaded you will find, to be corroborative of the facts and principles advanced in that declaration. That, in part, is the path my new book will take you on, Rediscovering Americanism and the Tyranny of Progressivism. This will be my 7th book. And if we don't count Rescuing Sprite, it'll be my 6th book on substantive issues that relate to philosophy and history and economics and surround liberty. Liberty. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to the Wall Street Journal editorial page today. And you have to wonder, when I read this to you, really what kind of intellectual lightweights write the editorials for this once great editorial page, which isn't even second tier anymore. It's a joke. Can you think of anything profound or compelling that you've read in the Wall Street Journal editorial page in the last decade? That's because the writers, for the most part, consist of snarky lightweights. And here's the title of today's editorial, unsigned, In Praise of the Establishment. In Praise of the Establishment. Justice Gorsuch was vetted and confirmed by a political elite. I want you to listen to this. The ignorance is profound. Neil Gorsuch was sworn in Monday as the 113th Justice of the United States Supreme Court. And if his many lower court opinions are a guide, he has the potential to be a worthy successor to the great Antonin Scalia. But we don't want to let the moment pass without noting that Justice Gorsuch wouldn't be taking his seat on the High Court without the good work of the much-maligned establishment. This is a line that Fred Barnes is using. So the establishment Republican media, their surrogates, are in full defense of the indefensible, as I will explain. They go on. Don't tell Mark Levin, but Judge Gorsuch is a card-carrying member of America's elite. Now let's stop right there. America's elite. I don't have a problem with people who are elite athletes, elite thinkers, elite politicians, we call them statesmen, elite thinkers, elite writers. These can be exceptional people. I have a problem with elitism. That is, the imposition by masterminds, whether they have Ivy League credentials or they come out of the bayou of Louisiana, like Huey Long, who seek to impose their will on us, who seek to follow the utopian statist progressive agenda, or those who claim to be conservatives and constitutionalists, and yet when in power refuse to take on, challenge, engage the very forces they claim to oppose. Now, anyone who listens to this program for a period of time, not in and out, anyone who's read any of my books knows this to be the case. But it would appear the editorial writers, the circle nerds at the Wall Street Journal, are not only misguided, they're quasi-illiterate. They're quasi-illiterate. They simply do not understand conservatism, and they don't wish to. They do not understand constitutionalism. They do not wish to. They do not understand the Reagan Revolution, or they do not wish to. They do not understand the Tea Party Revolution, or they do not wish to. And the irony is, there would be no Justice Neil Gorsuch if the Wall Street Journal editorial page had had its way, since at no time did they ever endorse Donald Trump for President of the United States that I'm aware of. Moreover, they spent a lot of ink trashing Ted Cruz, who is a quintessential conservative. They've spent a lot of ink trashing conservatives. And so they write in praise of the establishment. Why? Who nominated Mr. Gorsuch? And I remember Mrs. Gorsuch, Ann Gorsuch. Know Gorsuch's mother. I didn't know her well, but I knew her. She was Reagan's first administrator at the Environmental Protection Agency, and she was a solid conservative. And they chased her out of town. They ruined her career. The left, the media. Hardly an establishmentarian, by the way. But let's continue. Don't tell Mark Levin, but Judge Gorsuch is a card-carrying member of America's elite. He attended Columbia, Harvard, and Oxford. Well, why do I care? I have no problem with that. He clerked at the Supreme Court. Good. So did Ted Cruz and Mike Lee. So I have a lot of fine people. He worked at a prestigious law firm. Good. And spent a decade on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. Exactly. These are the credentials of an accomplished legal mind. And they and the judge's first-rate temperament are the reasons that Democrats couldn't defeat him. Try though they did. Now he can apply that experience and intellect to advance conservative legal principles for a generation or more. Again, illiterate. You're not advancing conservative legal principles. You're an originalist. You're upholding the Constitution. It's neither conservative nor liberal. It's neither independent nor moderate. These are constitutional principles. You don't take a political nomenclature and apply it to constitutional principle, and now we can advance. No, these are liberty principles. These are civil society principles, separation of powers, and so forth and so on. Again, the ignorance bleeds into the pages of the Wall Street Journal because of the low quality of the writers, as it turns out. The editorial goes on. The establishmentarianism gets worse. They think they're funny. Judge Gorsuch has also been associated with the Federalist Society, the group of lawyers founded in the early 1980s to promote conservative legal ideas. At the time, the legal profession was dominated by progressives. As its main professional guide, the American Bar Association continues to be. Half the lawyers in this country are not members of the ABA. Moreover, the Federalist Society began under the Reagan administration, with the tutelage of some of the great Reagan appointees and others, having nothing to do with the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal and the circle nerds over there, by the way. And it goes on. It is also no accident that Leonard Leo, the executive vice president on leave from the Federalist Society, played a sizable role developing the list of 21 potential Supreme Court nominees for Donald Trump. Well, what does that have to do with anything? Mr. Leo and his... May I remind these fools again, they opposed Donald Trump. Leonard Leo wouldn't be advising Hillary Clinton, would he? So in the general election, they couldn't even come forth and endorse him for president. I'm right about that, right, Mr. Producer? That's my recollection. Mr. Leo and his allies serve as intellectual vetters to reassure conservative voters who've been disappointed with too many justices nominated by Republican presidents. Now, this is a confluence of ideas here. Most conservative voters are unhappy once these guys get on the bench, or gals, and then reverse course. That's when we become unhappy. Let's continue. Mr. Trump, the populist candidate, needed the Federalist Society as an elite legal credentialing service. Well, I like the Federalist Society, but actually that's not the case. But we needed the Federalist Society to come up with the 21? 10 of us conservatives could have come up with 21. Many of the names on the list are well known. But then again, this isn't a put down of the Federalist Society. I like the Federalist Society. This is a rambling, incoherent editorial by the lightweights at the Wall Street Journal editorial page. Let's continue. And here's where they're headed. Then there's the ultimate establishment body, the U.S. Senate. The U.S. Senate isn't an establishment body, you idiots. It's a constitutional body. It's not an establishment body. It's a constitutional body. You don't even understand the terms you're throwing around. They say ignorance is bliss, but it's also widespread, apparently. Led by the ultimate institutionalist, Mitch McConnell, the majority leader was able to maintain the unity of this, variegated conference last year to deny a vote or a hearing to President Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland. Now, keep something in mind, folks. We gave the Senate to the Republicans. There's not a word here about that. We gave the House to the Republicans in 2010. We gave the Senate to the Republicans in 2014. It is we who drove the agenda to make sure that we get an originalist on the Supreme Court. Not Mitch McConnell. Moreover, Barack Obama nominated somebody with 1 year left in his presidency, the first time in 180 years. If Mitch McConnell had let that go through, there would have been a revolt within the Republican Party and the conservative movement like this country's never seen before, well beyond anything that's already occurred. So let's not turn Mitch McConnell into George Patton. Does anyone, they go on, think Senators Ted Cruz or Mike Lee could have pulled that off? See? Yes, I do. I raise my... Yeah, I do. I think they could have. What the Wall Street Journal happens to be saying is, so stupid are the rest of these Republican senators that they would have voted to put Garland on the Supreme Court just because they might have been miffed at Cruz and Lee. They don't even understand they're damning these other Republicans. Then this year, this is really a Mitch McConnell piece. It shouldn't say in praise of the establishment. It should say in praise of Mitch McConnell, because that's who these hacks are. McConnell talks to these guys all the time. Fred Barnes talks to these guys all the time. They've been around forever. This is what they do. So you're going to trash Ted Cruz and Mike Lee. Very interestingly, both of those men have served as clerks on the Supreme Court. Matter of fact, I think, I could be wrong, that both of them were clerks at one time or another to Rehnquist, the Chief Justice. No, I am wrong. I think Mike Lee was a clerk to Sam Alito, but whatever. And I might remind these circle nerds over there at the Wall Street Journal that Sam Alito, having been a civil servant in the office of the Solicitor of the United States, had to be approved for a political position, which eventually would enable him to get the U.S. Attorney slot and led to his circuit court position and therefore and so forth, through me, when I was working for the Attorney General of the United States and pushed his papers through the White House. These fools don't know anything. Anything. Then this year, Mr. McConnell kept moderate members on board to break a Democrat filibuster of Judge Gorsuch. By the way, Fred Barnes has written exactly the same thing, so the talking points are out. The outcome was far from foregone. Well, yeah, I will finish this because I have to take a hard break when we come back. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You have to keep something in mind, ladies and gentlemen. The Wall Street Journal profits when it takes the position of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Mitch McConnell. They expose themselves year after year. And they have to sell subscriptions, online and hard copy newspapers. They are never going to support constitutional conservatism, ever. So in the end, here and there, they even take credit. They give Mitch McConnell credit. Mitch McConnell wouldn't even be majority leader but for you. Mr. Gorsuch wouldn't even have been nominated but for you. The Federalist side wouldn't even exist but for conservatives. The Wall Street Journal has contributed nothing to any of this. They sit back and they shoot spitballs at people. That's what they do. And they see no problem with massive debt. They see no problem with open borders. They see no problem with any of this. So who exactly do they represent and speak for? Well, whoever gives them the coin, you see, ladies and gentlemen, they represent the corporatists and the crony capitalists. That's who they are. They're a foil for me, by the way. We'll be right back. Have I told you that when you walk to your mailbox today, you'll find $1,500? $15 you've been needing to finally buy the gun of your dreams? You can add the Kimber or a new hunting rifle to your collection. Or what about the custom 1911 you've been drooling over? Well, the dream will come true for 10 of you. Thanks to my good friends at the United States Concealed Carry Association, who provide education, training, and self-defense insurance for responsible gun owners like you and me. If you're ever forced to shoot, or even just draw your gun in self-defense, the USCCA will be your first call after 9/11. To help you navigate the murky waters of the legal system and keep you out of hot water. But remember, their giveaway won't last forever. And $1,500, that's a lot of money. You'll basically be able to pick any gun off the shelf. Don't miss this opportunity. Your entry to win is 100% free. Head over to defendthem.com right now to lock in your 10 chances to win the gun of your dreams. That's defendthem.com. You could win a brand new gun. Defendthem.com. You know, one of my closest buddies, really like a brother, is David Limbaugh. David Limbaugh. And he writes these compelling books. And he's got a compelling book out right now. And it's called Discover the True Jesus Through the Four Gospel Stories. Now, I have to tell you, obviously being Jewish, this isn't my area of expertise, but I've always interested in it and fascinated by it. So I wanted to bring my brother, David Limbaugh, on to talk about it. How are you, sir?
Mark, thanks for having me on. How are you?
Let me look. I'm doing great, thank you. Thank you. So your book is already shooting up the list here, so tell us about it.
Yeah, Sean had me on both shows tonight, last night and yesterday, and it went up to 7 on Amazon, which is really pretty amazing. So we're excited about that. The book is, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Now you're on a big show.
Exactly. Tell Sean that. I'll tell Sean.
Yeah, go ahead.
What's he doing anyway?
Right.
So, my original plan was to write a primer on the New Testament, the entire New Testament. And as I got into the Gospels, which are the first 4 books of the New Testament, I really got immersed in them. And I called my publisher, Regnery, and I asked if I could go ahead and narrow the focus and just go in depth in the Gospels. And they readily agreed. So what I've done is write an introduction to the Gospels. It's in 2 parts, pretty simple. The first 4 chapters of the first part go into the history of the time between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament time when Jesus came. So 400 B.C. roughly to when Malachi, the last book of the Old Testament, was written, and when Jesus came on the scene about 3 A.D. That period in the Holy Land was in turmoil during that period. The Jews had been restored from Babylonian captivity by the Persian king Cyrus. So they were in the land, and they faced succeeding oppressors, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans. And so when Jesus came, it was pretty chaotic. So I go into that Old Testament history and what the climate was like when Jesus came. And then the main thrust of the book, though, is in part 2, chapters 5 through 12, where I basically give a compendium of all the Gospels. There are 4 Gospels, but I combine them into one not perfectly harmonious account, but a consolidated account where I combine all the events and discuss them, usually Jesus' words verbatim, and a lot of the events that are described there verbatim, and then I have commentary going on. And here's the point, Mark. So many people, and you may not be aware of this, so many Christians even are intimidated by the Bible, and they don't know where to begin. And I don't know if Jewish people are that way with the Torah. I have no idea, but a lot of us are intimidated by the Bible, and I've studied it a lot. And so I like to share what I've learned. I'm excited about it, passionate about it, and so I try to make it easier for people to understand, to accelerate their learning curve. And so I've done that with the last section of the book. I've basically restated all of the Gospels by staying true to the text. I don't intend to rewrite the book. I think it's the Word of God, so I don't tinker with it. It's not some new translation. It's a digest, a compendium, a condensation, and a commentary with the ultimate goal of having people be excited and inspired to read the Gospels themselves, which I think can be life-changing. So that's my ultimate goal. Of course, I want this book to succeed commercially, and I have self-interest in it, and I don't deny that. But I also believe I have a ministry, a lay ministry, to spread the word and to expose people to the Gospels and help them understand them and read them. And that's really my ultimate goal. It's as simple as that.
Let me ask you this. And I've known you a long time, and you've been a man of faith for a long time. When you sit down to write a book like this, it still takes a lot of research, right? It takes a lot of scholarship, even though you remember things from what you've read, even though it's ongoing for you, in order to make it coherent and comprehensive, right?
Oh, unbelievable! I probably have 1,200 footnotes in this, but the advantage I have is I have this incredible software. You do it the old-fashioned way. You got to dig it out, and I've seen your desktop. I've seen your dining room table. You really gut it out. And people that don't know this, they know how brilliant you are, so they just assume it's easy for you too. But you really work when you do your books. And what amazes me about you is you do these complex books and you reduce them to a digestible form, and that's much harder than doing a longer book. And I'm not just blowing smoke. So I have the luxury of doing a little longer book. They're comprehensive, but I have this software, this Bible software, that I have 23,000 books on it, and they're all searchable. And I have it at my fingertips 10 times the resources, maybe 20 times the resources the scholars had no less than 10 years ago. People that know 50 times more than me, I have access to far greater.
But that could make it even more overwhelming, couldn't it?
It can, except if you. One thing I like to do, and I've loved to do in the law practice, is research, and I think those skills transfer over into theology. And so I've learned how to research and kind of narrow things down. Sometimes it gets pretty problematic, but a lot of times I've figured out how to do it and glean the real salient stuff. So that's a challenge, but it's also gratifying. You know how books, they're really work, but man, are they one of the most gratifying endeavors we can undertake.
Now, you're a man of great faith. When did that happen? Have you always been a person of great faith, or was there a particular time in your life?
No, I didn't really believe. I didn't really embrace it. We were raised in church, but it didn't take too well with me. I was always a believer in God, but I didn't really embrace the Bible that much. And so when I was in my early 30s, I started studying it, and I wasn't convinced. And then I kept studying it, and I finally believed the evidence is overwhelming in favor of the truth of it, and so I converted. And so that's kind of what happened. But having come to it that way, kicking and screaming, I have a particular passion to share it with people, and I don't want to be obnoxious about it, and I don't want to try to share it with people that have no interest in learning it, and I don't believe in that kind of evangelism. But I like to share what I've learned, and so that's what I've done. And you're right. For probably the second half of my life, I've been a pretty ardent believer, but the first half I was pretty lackluster about it.
The book is Discover the True Jesus Through the Four Gospel Stories. It's up on my social sites, Mark Levin Show, Twitter, Mark Levin Show, Facebook. Gee, I almost forgot where I am. And you can also go to Amazon.com directly, Amazon.com, and I'm sure any major bookstore will have it too. Discover the True Jesus Through the Four Gospel Stories. Let me ask you this. Do you have to be Christian to read this book?
No. In fact, a lot of people that are not believers at all, I hope, read it and develop an interest in reading more and see where that leads them. I believe the Bible is an inspired Word of God, and I believe if people read it with an open mind and open heart, that God will speak to them, and that's the hope. But no, not at all. It's written for anybody who has an open-mindedness toward it, and that we'll see if anybody does. But of course, we always hope that happens.
Well, let's say that doesn't happen. It's still very interesting from a knowledge and historical perspective, right?
Yeah, I hope so, because I've got a lot of history, as I said, between the Testaments, and I think learning about the Bible is important even if you don't embrace the faith, because at least these are building blocks that later, I sometimes think we plant seeds, and many thousands of little seeds were planted in my path along the way, and it took the cumulative effect of those seeds before I finally became a believer. So I think every little bit can help on our faith journey. So, you just never know what's going to affect people. But I've really enjoyed doing it, and like I say, I'm not real aggressive in people's faces. That's not my style on evangelism, and I think we all have different approaches. But mine is to write books and share them, and hopefully some people will read. A lot of people, that have given me feedback on my other Christian-themed books, and they say that it has really helped them, and that's gratifying. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but to the extent that it does happen, it's a very satisfying feeling.
You are becoming among the most prominent writers, you use the phrase Christian-themed books, in the Christian-themed book arena, as far as I know. That's a big deal, isn't it?
Well, there are so many brilliant Christian writers that write exclusively in the Christian domain, and so many people aren't aware of those people. And I kind of straddle both venues, where I'm a political writer and a faith-based writer, and I think as a result of that, I have an opportunity to reach a certain group of people that the exclusively Christian writers won't reach. Even though they're far superior to me in what they do, maybe some of them also are a little too advanced for the beginning learner, and so maybe I have a role there too. There's a role we all play in this game and in this endeavor, and so I don't know how prominent I am in terms of that. I maybe have my own little niche because I, as I say, straddle the platforms. But in terms of Christian writers, no, there's so many great writers out there, you can't believe it.
Let me tell everybody how polite and respectful David Limbaugh is. I've been using the wrong title of his book. It's called The True Jesus, Uncovering the Divinity of Christ in the Gospels. I want to get it straight. The True Jesus, Uncovering the Divinity of Christ in the Gospels. So I just want to make sure people know we have it up on Mark Levin Show Facebook, Mark Levin Show Twitter. It is everywhere. I hope you will buy it. Dave Limbaugh, I know how hard you worked on this and how much this means to you, and I'm very, very excited for you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if Sean Hannity, radio and TV, can get him to number 7, let's get him into the top 5. So people who are interested in getting this, let's go. Go get it. You can get it discounted on there on Amazon.com. I just want to show Sean the kind of muscle we Levinites have, okay?
Hey, Mark.
Just for the fun of it. Yes, sir.
This is funny. You just said, let's go. Let me just share a little story. As you know, I just got back from Israel, and
Yes,
we
sir.
had a Christian guide, a good friend of mine, Frank Turek, but also a prominent Israeli archaeologist, a Jewish guy, and he was amazing. But he talked in broken English, and one of the things he said after he introduced each site, he goes, let's go, let's go. So there we go, let's go. Get your audience out there, let's go.
You know, all the Israelis to me sound like Jackie Mason. Have you noticed that?
Oh, yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
It's such a beautiful land. Oh, my
Yep.
gosh, I was blown away. So.
No, I'm going there in May. I'm going to do a couple of shows from there. I've never been there.
Yeah, and I was going to watch your house while you're gone, if that's okay.
Yeah, from the outside. Okay, Dave. Again, the book, The True Jesus, Uncovering the Divinity of Christ in the Gospels. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very exciting book. I know you're going to love it. Plus, I want to beat Hannity. So let's do it. All right, my brother. Take care of yourself.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Bye.
You too. God bless. I'm serious about it. Both. He is an exquisite writer and storyteller, and I guarantee it's going to be incredibly fascinating, particularly those of you of the Christian faith. Again, I want to kick Hannity's butt. So we'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
I have breaking news in 1 minute, ladies and gentlemen. And it is breaking news. What do you really know about our rich American history and heritage? Can you tell the stories that help make our country exceptional? If not, please hear me. Hillsdale College has a new free online course on our unique American story that's unlike anything else, and it covers our external and internal struggles for freedom. If you're thinking that you just don't have time, I understand. So take my challenge. Just watch 5 minutes of the first lecture by my friend Dr. Larry Arnn on why it's important to study American history, and I guarantee you'll be hooked. You and your children need to take this course because it provides information you won't find anywhere else. Your kids won't get this in school, and we didn't either. It's available for free to teachers and their classes, too. Please try it. You can access this powerful American heritage course at levinforhillsdale.com. As always, it's free as part of Hillsdale's mission to help all Americans pursue truth and defend liberty. That's levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com. All right, headline Washington Compost. Breaking news. FBI obtained FISA warrant to monitor former Trump advisor Carter Page. So here we have a leak now to the Washington Post. The FBI obtained a secret court order last summer to monitor the communications of an advisor to presidential candidate Donald Trump, part of an investigation into possible links between Russia and the campaign, law enforcement and other U.S. officials said. Brian Stelter, over at CNN, you owe me an apology. Let's continue. The FBI and the Justice Department obtained the warrant targeting Carter Page's communications after convincing the FISA court judge that there was probable cause to believe Page was acting as an agent of a foreign power, in this case Russia, according to officials. This is the clearest evidence so far that the FBI had reason to believe during the 2016 presidential campaign that a Trump campaign advisor was in touch with Russian agents. Stop! Unfortunately, it's the end of the program. Look how they spin it. To me, it's the clearest evidence so far that the Obama administration was politicizing intelligence with police state tactics. Such contacts are now at the center of an investigation into whether the campaign coordinated with the Russian government to swing the election in Trump's favor. Also, ladies and gentlemen, note the timing. not just of the leak, but the spin by the Washington Post. Page has not been accused of any crimes, and it is unclear whether the Justice Department might later seek charges against him or others in connection with Russia's meddling in the 2016 presidential election. See, this is how news is reported today. Well, we don't know if he'll be charged. He hasn't been charged yet. He's not accused of anything yet, but you never know. The counterintelligence investigation into Russian efforts to influence U.S. elections began in July, officials said. Well, we know that because Comey said it. Most such investigations don't result in criminal charges. Just listen to this. So don't worry, folks, even if there's not criminal charges, there ought to be, you see, because most such investigations don't result in criminal charges. The officials spoke about the court order on the condition of anonymity, of course, because they were not authorized to discuss details of the intelligence probe. And they have, I won't have time to finish this, so they have a graphic with Russia's ambassador in the middle, all four chins, by the way, and then a line to Trump, a line to Flynn, a line to Page, a line to Sessions, and a line to Kersher. This Page, this Washington Post, like the rest of them, is a disgusting fraud. A disgusting fraud of a newspaper. So what we get out of this, ladies and gentlemen, is this. They went to the FISA court to go after this guy, Page. That's what we know so far. We'll know more tomorrow. I'll be here. No thanks to the Wall Street Journal editorial page, by the way. We salute all you heroes out there. Check out Levin TV tonight. It's a great program. See you tomorrow.